We were speaking to our economist, Trevin, from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I want to go back to revisit that question we were asking right when we had to jump out to Mr. O'Toole about the level of insolvency that we're expecting to see in the Canadian business community going into this second wave. What does the picture look like for Canada?
It looks very bleak for the businesses in the hardest hit sectors. So certainly, many businesses in many sectors have been able to adapt, but those really hard hit sectors that were provided with sector specific support today are looking at a pretty grim winter. Many Canadians have heard about the plight that restaurants are facing, that arts companies are facing, that retail stores are facing, and in particular small businesses. And so there are a lot of supports in place, certainly when it comes to the wage subsidy and the top up to 75%, which is what was available during the first wave, is very much appreciated by a number of small businesses, and the Canadian Chamber was certainly calling for that ourselves. And obviously the changes to the rent subsidy, since there were a number of flaws with the KECRA program, which was even demonstrated in perhaps not as large of an uptake in that program as was anticipated. But it's still going to be tougher for many businesses, simply because there are restrictions put in place. They have, for restaurants, they have very small margins. So even if they have reduced capacity, they might not, even be able to make a profit. And so it's going to be tough for the next few months for those.
Is there anything that business had asked for that wasn't included in this?
So I think certainly having a fiscal anchor or a bit more robust fiscal guardrail would be useful. I mean, there's no red line there, right? It's the government will monitor data when it comes to employment and other things to determine the fiscal outlook and fiscal capacity of the government. But certainly, looking for an actual fiscal anchor would have been useful. Certainly we saw, an announcement of new numbers on the deficit, which was useful because we haven't seen those since July. And I think there are a couple of questions here. First of all spending isn't created equal. Some types of spending will have a greater positive impact on the economy and on businesses and on individual Canadians than others. And so I imagine, we're going to see a lot of that in the budget next year. And then secondly, of course, one-time deficits or emergency spending obviously makes sense to support Canadians today. The question is, whether this $100 billion that we're going to see in the budget and future budgets, will that result in structural deficits with new programs or not, is one of the questions out there too.
Trevin, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your insight and analysis.